Feel free to obviously use the chat. And this is a pretty informal call, but a chance to connect with like-minded, as we were just discussing some of the work going on in Europe. There's certainly a lot of interest across the state of Colorado, which is sort of the focus of this call, but also we try to layer in other national work going on, and are excited about the ACE DOE Blockchain Innovation Challenge, and having some folks here that are part of proposals and have been working towards a looming deadline of October 30th to get those proposals in. So we're going to hear a little bit about some of that work. So before we jump in here, anyone want to just we got a small enough group. If anyone would like to intro or re-intro, we'll let the folks that are chatting BIC specifically do an intro when we get there. But anybody else that would just like to say hi real quick and introduce yourselves to the group. This is always a new and eclectic mix of folks, so feel free. I'll probably we can leave things sort of open, unmute, and feel free to say hi if you'd like.
Hi.
Hi, Taylor. I just want to reintroduce myself and the work I'm doing with Livex. And I also wanted to share that we are submitting a proposal through the university. So through the coalition of the land grant universities, Susan and Michael Dell Foundation has an RFP now for 21st century skills innovation, which is what Livex is doing. So I'm actually, so we had an internal kind of a process of selecting the proposal that will move forward through the Chancellor's office. So I'm happy to share that Livex has been selected to move forward. And so I'm going to submit that proposal. The deadline is November 3rd. And then at the end of December, we'll find out if we get funded. So it's a $50,000 grant proposal, which is a nice amount. And it is basically promoting innovation in higher education and K-12 spaces for 21st century skills, which is great. And so connected with Taylor yesterday, we're thinking about some synergies in terms of, being part of the ecosystem and all of those things. So appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Geeta. And exciting. Yeah, I think there's definite room for some collaboration. We've got some good things going. And I just dropped the link to Livex. Cool project. Feel free to check it out. Anybody else want to jump in and say hi, and then we'll move ahead.
Sure, I'll speak. Hi, I'm Wendy Charles, Chief Scientific Officer at Burst IQ, but it's kind of cold today, so that's why I'm wrapped in a blanket. I wanted to share, I'm working on a project where blockchain is used to manage the informal and formal education credentials that people can take with them across their lifetime. And there's quite a bit of compelling academic literature emerging in this issue. So I just wanted to put a call out to the group. If anyone else is working on that particular topic, I'd love to connect with you and learn more about what you have found helpful and what messaging has worked for you so that I can proceed in a way that would really help people.
Awesome. Yeah, good to see you, Wendy. And I'll actually drop a link to Burst as well. Amazing local Colorado project.
Yeah, thank you.
In Colorado. And yeah, a ton of overlap, obviously, between education and healthcare. So
absolutely.
Yeah, we're still moving in a very similar direction. And Wendy, you've got education in your background.
Yay.
So
I do, yeah, from the University of Colorado Anschutz Medical Campus in particular. So yeah. Great.
Cool.
Okay, and thank you, Lisa. I'll see if I can connect with you offline.
Love it. So maybe one more intro if someone else would like to jump in.
Taylor, I don't know whether you want us to introduce ourselves later, but I'm Greg Nadeau with Public Consulting Group, and our partner Margie Reed from Randa. Maybe you all already know Damon from Randa, and Tracy is here from North Dakota Information Technology Divisions, and we're working together on a open credential publisher that will enable statewide e-transcript publishing with North Dakota that will be released as an open source component as part of the IEEE ILR ecosystem recommended practices. So I'm just happy. I think we're all happy to be here, meet with like-minded people, and collaborate and share.
Thanks, Greg. Yeah, and certainly between the 4 or 5 that are here, feel free. You guys can kind of make a call on what you want to share as part of that section a little bit later. But yeah, obviously some great work going on, and North Dakota has surfaced, by way of a lot of leadership, Greg certainly, and Tracy and others, and Marty at Randa. So we're excited about that project. So let's. I'm gonna, and maybe actually, Greg, often we have Colin give a quick IEEE update. So maybe good, since you were on here, if you'd like to say anything. He wanted to just share that we had another meeting coming up, I think on the 12th, but Greg, feel free, November 12th. But feel free if you have anything worth layering in when it comes to IEEE or some of the standards work broadly.
Well, I guess I'll just, I'll put in the chat the main thing that is happening in IEEE ILR, which is we're coalescing on a conceptual model and a logical component decomposition that identifies 8 common components needed for an Internet of Education ecosystem. And so each of those kind of 8 buckets will have one or more set of recommended practices, and hopefully we'll each have connections to open source initiatives related to that component. So what we're all working together with North Dakota on is the credential publisher. We're going to be hearing from Learning Economy Foundation on this Thursday's Ed 3.0 call about the universal wallet. Those are 2 of the components. But if this is an open doc, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them in as comments. If you've got any edits, changes, hopefully this can provide a common framework for collaboration so that when we engage with folks, like as we said at the beginning, like the European community, we can kind of get apples to apples comparisons and say, okay, here's what we're doing with that. What are you doing with that? Here's what you're doing. And we can kind of break down the big problem into smaller, more manageable problem spaces that can create more interchangeable components and services.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg, for that. And in fact, I'm curious too, maybe Wendy, let's follow up because I think there's parallel things happening in healthcare. I'm actually curious now.
Oh, I could talk for days about the things I'm working on in healthcare and life sciences.
Let's follow up, because I'm actually, when it comes to some of the standards work, there's it's sort of overdue, and I'm wondering if there is sort of some alignment
sure.
to keep these trains on similar tracks.
Sure. At any point you're interested, I can talk about the work that the IEEE group that I am on is creating standards for life sciences research. So. Yeah, there's a whole research sort of movement happening, I think, right now as well. So. Absolutely. This is part of their, there's an IEEE, so I'm part of a couple IEEE groups for standards. One is for governance and the other is for healthcare. And then I'm co-chair of the subcommittee for standards for life sciences research.
Awesome. Love it. Yeah. And feel free, as we move forward here, share emails, contact, whatever.
Okay.
If there's alignment to be found, we can certainly,
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg. Yeah.
And I definitely want to take us off track anyway, but it's so timely that if anyone wants to follow up with Marty or me, yesterday we met to talk about application of the very same verifiable credential technology with the trusted issuers to holders in wallets that then are able to produce verifiable credentials applied to COVID test results. This is what enables zero knowledge proof entrance to buildings in exchange for multiple different potential answers to safety. So it could be, you have to either be vaccine yes, or COVID virus no within the last 24 hours, or COVID virus no within the last 14 days with daily symptom tracking. And you could then have the wallet then reply green, I meet one of those 3 challenges, right? So that's, Marty's now able to kind of demonstrate the fundamentals of that. And I think we're looking for places to rapidly bring that into adoption. And so if anyone's interested in that, then contact either of us separately.
Yeah, no worries about, and we're still on time. We usually give about 10 or 15 for this sort of early stuff. So we're still there. And yeah, I mean,
just a little elaboration on that. We built the COVID testing portal for labs. So it's directly connected to the labs and has a messaging architecture already built into it. We're running about 400 to 800 tests per day right now through the system, and then that will mature into the verified credential architecture that Greg was noting.
Exciting, yeah, good stuff. I mean, yeah, there's never been a more timely moment to accelerate some of the promising and ethical technology that I think we all are aligning around. So awesome work. Obviously, Marty, goes without saying. You guys are a huge part of all of this. Cool. So let's move on, and I'll do a quick, I guess, intro for those that haven't joined the call previously. But C-Lab and these pulse calls are really just a chance to connect and share, create collective insights. C-Lab is about a year old now. It's a partnership between Learning Economy, the Department of Higher Education in Colorado, increasingly the Governor's Office of Information Technology, and it's really just meant to be a space to provide aligned but decentralized collaboration, innovation, experimentation, failing across this sort of intersection of education and employment. So that's the goal with C-Lab, and we're entering, I think, a pretty exciting phase where we've got a lot of good momentum. We've got a lot of alignment around, what we can do in the state, and now really, getting very serious about what are the sort of core pilots and some of the proofs. And obviously there is work already on the ground that's been in development. So also just trying to be a connective sort of tissue between a lot of the existing work that's already in place or underway. So with that in mind, and speaking of sort of connecting the dots a little bit, I wanted to give Duncan just a quick moment to make mention of the Community Hub, which we just launched on the last call last month, but wanted to make sure folks were aware and knew how to access that.
Yeah, hi everyone. Duncan Cox here with Learning Economy Foundation. I actually think I might have talked to all of you one time or another, but yeah, we launched the Community Hub last month, and it's going quite well. I think we have a couple of ways for you to engage with the Hub. I'm going to be posting some links here. The first is a link to the web app where you can just log into the website, create an account, or if you have an existing account with, for example, the T3 network LER Hub, then you can use that account as well to sign up for the C-Lab Community Hub. We also have an Android app and an iPhone app, which you can use the same accounts to access through the Internet of Education app. So yeah, I'll follow up with those links as well. But yeah, feel free to hop into the Hub. And if you have any questions about how to use it or any thoughts about how we could be using it better, please send an email to me. I'll share my email in the chat as well. So thanks.
Awesome. Perfect, Duncan. Thanks. Yeah, it's an evolving space that is a resource to the Colorado community. Use it if and when it makes sense. Ignore it when you've got 1,000 other things to think about. I think both of those are perfectly reasonable. But yeah, hopefully provides a good sort of portal to a lot of this work. We'll keep links updated in just this open running agenda that's been included in a lot of the invites and stuff too. So you can always jump to the C-Lab Pulse agenda to grab some of these links. Any thoughts, questions on the C-Lab Community Hub, the T3 Innovation LER Hub? A lot of these acronyms might be foreign to some folks, which is fine. We can describe some of this in deeper detail if we need to. But any thoughts or questions on those sort of resource hubs? Going once, twice. If not, cool. We'll keep moving. And this is good because I really want to leave as much time as possible for others that have joined to discuss some of their work. So I'm going to probably just move beyond some of the work going on in Colorado. Spencer Ellis from CDHE is going to try to join, but he was likely to be a bit late, but he can give some updates on some of other work connected to this blockchain proposal. So let's do, I don't think we have any rhyme or reason to the order. Lisa, do you feel good to go to give a little chat on what we've been up to in Maine? I'd love to tee you up to chat about that for about 10 minutes. if that works for you.
That works for me.
Cool.
So hi, I'm Lisa Shaw. I'm with the Maine State Library. I work as the workforce development specialist and small and rural library specialist under library development with the state library. I was previously a library director. I've worked with the Department of Labor. I've done all kinds of things in the past. And why am I here? How did I get here? I feel like a talking head song. I've got, my desk, I've got this wall of quotes. And one of my favorites is from Louis Ferrante, who's a really good library supporter and former Gambino crime family mobster, who wrote that every major scheme or crime the mafia ever came up with was spawned from these 4 simple words: I got an idea. It's the most quoted phrase I ever heard of the mob and makes everyone suddenly stop and listen. And I love that, because sometimes you just get an idea and you think at first, maybe I'm the only one that's thinking this, but over time you start to find other people who are also thinking it too. And then something really good starts to happen. I was introduced to Taylor through Claire Sullivan, who works at the University of Maine flagship campus at Orono around digital credentialing. We were part of a consortium that is working on a Lumina Foundation funded grant around all learning counts. And what Jamie Marasatis has been wanting to do for years is, and please let me preface this with no hate toward higher education, but it's not accessible for everybody in the current format that we have right now, whether it's cost or whether it's being able to get to it. And that was even before the pandemic hit and made it very difficult. So we also know, though, that people are lifelong learners. They're learning stuff on their own in different places, but what we have not had is a good way to capture and quantify and prove what people have been learning and the usefulness of it to share with an employer or to share with a higher education institution. We have heard so many stories. One that really struck me when I was at Lumina just over a year ago, last year, was a woman who was finishing up her associate's degree. And, she'd had to take out some loans to finish this and everything. And there she was right at the end. And the school came back and said, oh, you need a math to finish this degree in order to acquire it. And it meant that she was going to have to take out further funding to acquire, to get this course. But what was ridiculous is that the person who was going to be teaching the course, this student had been doing that instructor's taxes for years. And like, why? Well, just because that's what it says you've got to do. And that made no friggin' sense. And that's the kind of thing that Lumina's looking at and saying, this is bizarre. We have people who, have on the job training that they've done for years, or who have been learning stuff on the side. Entrepreneurs, how do you credential, people that have been doing their own business forever and suddenly decide, look, I want to go over into the regular job market or whatever. So there's just a hot mess of that out there. And that's what that was looking at. But at the same time that whole all learning counts thing was happening over here, the state library was also talking with other libraries around the country around the idea of solving a problem with integrated library systems that don't talk to each other. These things are going to connect, I promise, and within 10 minutes. In Maine, we have 261 public libraries scattered around the state. They're all locally owned and operated. So there's no systems other than, like academic or school libraries or things like that. But our public libraries is 261. Excellent internet connection, the best in the country. But because they're all locally owned and operated, everybody gets their own software platform that they use to manage their collections and their patrons. So some go with Atrium because that works best for them, and some go with Library World because that works best for them, and Koha. There's like a billion of them out there. They don't talk to each other. When Wendy has talked about like health things, it's the same problem. If you're listening, you start hearing similar problems in other industries that are just like your own. My daughter has numerous health issues that she's getting help on, and she's had to go to Portland and to Caribou and Bangor and all these different places, and those hospital systems, to send her records from one to another, they have to download it, put it on a desk, mail it to this other hospital, and their IT people have to unlock it. Why? What year is this? We can land on a friggin' asteroid, but we can't like transfer a medical record. Give me a break. And I learned, from our legislature that even the utility companies, the power companies, can't talk to each other. Their platforms don't talk. So this is a common problem. And it's one that kind of connects back to the whole learning thing. There's all these like noble gases of things out there that aren't interacting with anything. And how do we gather those and start connecting them together? Well, one thing we know for sure is that proprietary vendors have zero motivation to build any kind of an API that's going to talk to their competitor. Why should I do that? They don't want to do that. And so is this being like broadcast anywhere? Can I rant?
I mean, you're welcome to rant. We do share these up on our YouTube page.
Okay, I'll be careful. Thank you. So the approach that's been taken historically is to say, well, let's see if we can kind of get everybody over onto one software platform. That's not going to work. They don't want to do it. They shouldn't have to do it. Like, why are we spending so much time, money, energy, resources, asking everybody else to change how they're doing instead of finding one big meta way to go down over the top of it and connect everybody with each other? So that's where the discussion for blockchain started to arise. We at the State Library started working with a group headed by the San Jose University iSchool over a year ago. That we're kind of coalescing around this idea and starting to build something, around the idea of a universal resolver or a universal library card. Their goal being, to be able to move people, seamlessly from library to library without, oh, welcome to the town, you're not a resident, you need to get a card here. So, you're walking around with like, when you open your wallet and you've got like loyalty cards to all these businesses and stuff, and you always pull out your Ocean State Job Lot 1 when you're at Target by mistake because they're both red. So we wanted to kind of cut down on that with library cards too, one card to rule them all. And when we started looking at that in Maine, we also started saying, and can we not also capture the learning that people are doing in libraries? Because we get people past the paywall of access to a lot of really good learning platforms, and capture that, let them hang on to those credentials that they've earned and prove them, but at the same time, keep that information separate from what they're checking out on their library card, because that's protected by federal and state statute. So that's how we landed here, and are working on that. That's the problem we're trying to solve. And I'm glad that Wendy was able to recognize Castiel, because as we're writing it up, what we decided to do, I say we, I'm using the royal we right here, but so far everybody has supported me on it. Rather than just, the order of blockchain, is to say, look, here's Castiel. He came to Maine. He's lost his job. He's lost his apartment. He's temporarily homeless. He's looking to get started again. He's got no identifying credentials with him. And he wants to start acquiring learning credentials because he can go to the library because they're open to everybody, and start building up again. How can we help him get over the hump of no ID, no card, and start having something that he can hang on to be economically mobile, self-sovereign, own his data, own his credentials, and be able to move them around and connect them between systems. So that's did that make any sense?
I mean, I have context. It certainly did to me. And I mean, obviously you've got a passion for this stuff, which is why it's been awesome. It's been awesome working with you. Yeah, I mean, for many years, we've discussed how vital we think the National Library Network really should be in all of this. So really exciting how a lot of this is, aligning around, potentially the Maine State Library sort of being a I guess, beacon towards what we could actually do beyond. So perfect. Any real quick thoughts, questions for Lisa, and then we'll keep moving forward.
WTF is a fair question too. I mean, it's okay. If you're like, that made no sense at all, I won't be offended.
Lisa, I would just say I'm here in Massachusetts and be happy to connect with you to think about some things that we could be doing around in these states.
Sweet. I will put my email in the chat.
Cool. And maybe the last thing I'll say, any project like this or any grant submission just takes a willingness to be very understanding and collaborative. And I think, Lisa, to your credit, and obviously others, a lot of folks at Design Lab and others that have been a part of this, you know, this can't happen without a shared spirit and a sort of shared understanding of how to make this work and move forward, and not getting caught up in whatever political battles or other things that we know add friction to what is a really challenging problem, right? So just, yeah, can't sing praises enough for everybody that's been a part of it. It's been fun. Cool. Let's move on to the collection of folks that are spanning the country, but representing some of the work going on in North Dakota. So Tracy, Greg, Marty, I'll kind of leave it to you guys to run the next 10 or 15 here, however you'd like to approach it.
Tracy, are you there to start us?
Yeah, so in North Dakota, we have a statewide electronic transcript, high school transcript. And through our SLDS grants, I'm the director of the statewide longitudinal data system here. And through SLDS grants for the NCES, there was an opportunity to get into blockchain. And so we thought it would be a perfect time for the state to initiate a blockchain project. You know, state governments are very interested in blockchain today and how it is practically used for citizens. And so we've taken this project and joined with a collab with PCG and Randa. And we've brought forward a design on publishing the North Dakota Electronic High School in CLR, LER, W3C verified credential, and publish that to a student's web wallet as well as a mobile wallet. So that's what we're kicking off right now. And I'll let Greg and Marty elaborate on that.
Marty, you want to just get right in? I don't, you came in a little late. Do you have a diagram? There's a new one that that just got done an hour ago. I don't know if you're gonna show that one or what. That's
yeah, let's see. I can probably show that one.
Hot off the press. Give us the latest.
Yeah.
Hang on one second here. Okay. So just kind of foundationally, let me share this screen, see if it works all right. Everybody see that? Well,
yep.
So the idea is really we have, you know, a number of different layers to how this open credential publisher integrates with the greater ecosystem of issuing institutions. This is, you know, representing, you know, what we're thinking about for the Midwestern Higher Education Compact, but thinking about the current issuing architecture, Parchment being a very large player in that space, universities individually, and so the idea being that a student can enter this ecosystem in any one of many places, but initiating that conversation at the higher ed, then pushing it through kind of the common translation or integration layers that exist today. One of them being Dexterra, has a very robust set of standards. Greenlight being a credential provider. And then of course, as Tracy mentioned, the e-transcripts, the PESC standard, and then also including alternate pathways certification. So Badger, MicroCredentials, those types of things. And so those would be through that translation or integration layer, they are posting a PDF and transcript / credentials from all of those sources in the CLR data standard. So packaging it all within the JSON, within a JSON object. And the beauty of it is, using some semantic web standards, we can actually package everything in it. So the PDF is packaged. There are no external links to external resources. That's then pushed into the Open Credentials publisher, which is what we're working on and building in North Dakota, to do a few things. One is we have an achievement service, which package that CLR and PDF into a single object, while also considering achievement descriptions. So using the case standard and the open salt server that's been deployed at North Dakota, we can make interpretations of the courses and standards alignments, and then align those inside those individual assertions, so that you have a very discrete view of your portfolio. So there can actually be 5,000 different achievement assertions in the single credential that we're publishing, and then providing a CLR verification endpoint for those systems to publish data into the achievement service. That then pushes through the publishing service, which through the peer DID trust over IP compliant model creates that relationship between the district DID and the transactional DID of the student. And then that will allow us to wrap that CLR in a verified credential package with individually signed assertions, and then publish that both to that student web wallet / viewer. So for those that are not quite verified credential ready or verifiable credential ready, we have a viewer architecture that can be utilized, and then also the student mobile wallet, with the consideration that there is actually a loop back. So whenever a student wants to publish their credentials back into one of these systems, one of these higher education institutions, or a state level system, or some, one of the publishing architectures, Badger, so on and so forth, we can do that directly from that mobile wallet. So you see a post of that verified credential back into the receiving institution. So it's a complete ecosystem at this point. And that's what we're trying to do, is kind of encapsulate the entire ecosystem, from student initiation all the way through student matriculation, to give you that complete and concise ecosystem. That's where we believe that the value of just this, where the Open Credential Publisher started, I don't know, 4 months ago, was it? About that. And it just started with achievement service and publishing service and e-transcripts. That was the beginning 4 months ago. And now we have, matured into a much more extensive presentation of that data.
Maybe I would let me just add something to that, Marty?
Please.
Yeah. So if you look at the link I sent before with the 8 components in the IEEE ILR, this is component 5. And what you'll see is that component 4, which is kind of the other side of what is it that the issuer does, right? And so in the case of North Dakota, the issuer is the state. The issuer has built a whole infrastructure to produce these e-transcripts from a single source. And a contrast is in a on a more complex or less mature, certainly less centralized ecosystem like Broward County Public Schools. There isn't a single issuer publisher, right? And so there we're working on that component 4, which is this achievement assertion tool, a way of kind of creating these fundamental record types, particularly more granular records that are associated with mastery assertions, drilling in that case to algebra. So, the idea is, that we're kind of putting these Lego building blocks together, and that, that there can be, wherever possible, they'll be open source, free, so any jurisdiction can just pick up the blocks they want, use the ones that they want, don't use the ones they don't want. build into their proprietary systems if that's what they want to do, or keep things fully open. And in that way, we can most accelerate the network of networks. So the goal is that a year, 2 years from now, we're going to be able to really have credential currency exchange, so that a kid starting in North Dakota can go over to Colorado and then go to Maine, right? And I forget what your name, Lisa, was that you said of the fellow who arrives in Maine, but have these verifiable credentials. Yep.
Ask Yale.
Yeah, exactly. Verifiable credentials from trusted issuers that are aligned to skill frameworks that are crosswalked between jurisdictions, so that just like you could earn money in North Dakota and spend it in Colorado, or even go across to Mexico and spend it, having these exchange rates for skills. That's the fundamentals of the financial system. That's what we want to build into the talent supply chain of the Internet of Education. So that's yeah.
Well, thank you guys. There's obviously a ton of pieces and parts, and I think Legos, we have a certain affection for Legos, but I think that's the perfect way to look at it, is just like, yeah, how do we construct this collection of blocks that have means of interoperating? And I'm glad you mentioned the Internet of Education, which I know most are aware, but a big umbrella over the top of a lot of this work is that sort of idea, and we're early on in sort of laying out some principles and thinking through just some of the high level, I don't even want to say governance, but at least alignment of thought at this stage, to move towards exactly what you just described. And yeah, I mean, this is, I was trying to delay because I didn't see Spencer, but I see he is on now, so we're good. The other thing I was thinking, I mean, the native Coloradan in me thinks like in a past life, I probably would have loved to be a high elevation prospector and early pioneer. And this is the modern pioneering that's going on, is this sort of work. So it's exciting. I mean, this is a lot of really ground floor stuff, and everybody I think is very willing to learn and get things wrong, because that's just going to have to be part of the process, but being understanding of that. So cool. We're right on time. Spencer, if you're good to go, I want to give you about 10 minutes and chat all things CDHE in Colorado and anything that makes sense. I know you're coming on the back of another meeting, so thanks for hopping over.
Oh, thanks for making time. Appreciate it. And I'm not sure if you shared anything before, Taylor.
No, I left it pretty much open, high level on C-Lab, but nothing deeper.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, we're firing on all cylinders and kind of continuing. I told Taylor kind of coming into this meeting that we didn't have any amazing, compelling updates to share, but continuing conversations and preparing what our conversation around this blockchain innovation challenge. Have you gotten to that part of this conversation, Taylor?
No, and we can obviously team up in whatever way makes sense, but no, yeah.
Okay, yeah, just kind of wrapping our minds around that. Again, I should introduce myself for those of you I haven't met. My name is Spencer Ellis. I work at the Colorado Department of Higher Education, director of our educational innovation work. And we're a state level agency that works with other state level agencies, but we also work with higher education institutions throughout the state, both public and private, our occupational schools. And so we have several divisions. My work primarily focuses on work with the traditional public institutions, community colleges, 4-year regional comprehensive research. So that's us, that's what we do. We help administer policy that's hopefully meaningful and learner focused as well. And so what we're wrapping our mind around is how this blockchain innovation challenge really actually aligns and is embedded, and where's the kind of the common thread with regard to some of the other work we already have in motion. Work around our state digital ID, which our colleagues over from the Office of Information Technology have presented at some of these meetings prior. So it's really exciting to hear about the work around our state digital ID and potential for that integration. A lot of the vision that North Dakota folks were just sharing, and Marty was just sharing a little bit about kind of this mobility, and Greg had mentioned the mobility of the potential of mobility, I should say, because one thing that we've known has been a barrier for students in the past is transfer. Not to get too into the weeds on education policy in our state, but I know it's a challenge in many other states, and not a lot of states have really truly figured out transfer. And so there's a lot of potential there that lies at the benefit, or would benefit the learner. So anyway, thinking around that, thinking around this statewide data trust that we've established, another one of my colleagues, Michael Vante, has presented at these on occasion, and we've had some great groundwork laid, lots of promising partnerships and collaborations to establish that data trust, and continuing to make sure that that is ensured, to ensure privacy, but also to ensure the individual's empowerment. And then thinking kind of the final layer is kind of this digital credentials and pathways, which has always been important to us in Colorado. But in the wake of the pandemic, I think you all can imagine higher ed obviously is looking to be as creative as possible. And so what are the meaningful levers that we can pull to enable those digital credentials and pathways that are not only focused on economic mobility, but really serve the learner in their best interest at all points of their learning throughout the life cycle of their educational journey. So that includes policy levers. Sometimes there's preventative barriers that disable institutions from being flexible. And so we're looking at that from a policy angle. That includes kind of these statewide partnerships that I mentioned, and then even beyond that, beyond the confines of our friendly state, partnerships that are meaningful on kind of a national or international level. So those are kind of some of the things we're thinking through. I told Taylor nothing in the past. We've had some opportunities to share with people. We have one, and I'll drop the link in the chat. We have an opportunity at our department for those who are in Colorado and are interested in education policy. We have an education policy fellows application that just went out. It'll be our second cohort of education policy fellows. I personally would love to see folks interested in kind of propelling this ed tech conversation in government, because ed tech is really kind of the nexus of where my work comes together. So if you know graduate students either at the master's or doctorate level who are interested in this education policy fellows opportunity, I'll drop that link again in the chat, and let me know. But Taylor, I don't know if there's anything else to cover. Just a quick overview of some things we've been thinking through.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, Spencer and I both have spent quite a bit of time in Colorado, and it's cool to see a lot of alignment between, pretty slow moving vehicles, state identity, credentialing and pathways, this idea of data collaboration and data trust. Like, we're really, in my opinion, seeing alignment across that entire ecosystem, which makes, there's, dozens of organizations, obviously, both private and public, thousands of individuals, tens and hundreds of thousands of students affected. So just starting to see alignment across all of that. And that's more or less what we're trying to frame up with the Blockchain Innovation Challenge. And if nothing else, that I think is going to be a good catalyst. It's been helpful for us, I think, just to get thinking out about what this new framework could look like at a state level. So it's been fun. I was going to say the one other, Greg mentioned early some of the work going on overseas. I think some of the new work, and Spencer, you had shared this as well. EBSI, that's worth peeking at. I think that's maybe one of the better analogs that we've been sort of looking at as we build out this framework. What does it look like to actually have a comprehensive framework? A little different when it comes to policy and politics in Europe with the UN than here, but it's a cool model to look at. So that's what we got. Any questions for myself or Spencer on CLab or any of our work? And if not, then we can just open the floor. Any thoughts and questions and idea? Free game at this point for the last 10.
I'm interested, particularly when I'm hearing, different components of, micro-credentialing and credentialing. in certain fields. The field that I'm in right now, and I have a colleague in Colorado, Karen Hickson, who's also extremely passionate about this thing. I've been in libraries for the last, I don't know, dozen or so years, but I did not go to library school. And a lot of people like me did not. And this is just, I'm presenting this just as a micro example of something that I think happens in a lot of fields. There's a schism in our field right now of people who need the masters and get the masters because they need the masters. And it's an expensive degree to get. And there are places that require that master's, and they're not even sure why they require it, but they do. And then there are a lot of us who can't afford to go after the master's and don't really need it, and probably, like, you know, a state job is probably going to pay about as well as anything out there. But there's a lot of places that don't pay enough to make it worth taking out a student loan and going over here. So these people who have to take out any kind of financial aid are never going to be able to work over in the rural, you know, libraries or smaller libraries or directorships, because they won't be able to make enough to pay off their debt. And these people aren't going to be able to go over here because they're not going to be able to afford to get the degree to go there. So a lot of discussion, and IMLS has been looking at this too, is what sort of middle ground can we find for people to get the training that they need to do this job? Interestingly, as a library director, if you go down and look at the curriculum of what's taught in a master's program for library sciences, it's not a bad curriculum, but it's not necessarily relevant to yeah, it's everywhere. It's not relevant to operating a library building. We were able to attract in Millinocket here a really good degreed librarian from New York, because he loves to hike and mountains, and it's right near Mount Katahdin. But of all the things that he learned, he's sitting in the building and he goes there, I have a leak in my ceiling and I don't know where it's coming from. So a lot of things that you're dealing with is, you're dealing with labor law, you're dealing with code, you're dealing with, working with municipal governments. It's things that, the old phrase, they don't teach you this in library school, HVAC. This is a big problem right now, because how do you manage the air inside of your building during a pandemic? And we're trying to find a middle ground for learning those skills and quantifying them and ensuring that they are in fact good skills that are provable, but that aren't yet another master's degree that a lot of people aren't going to be able to afford right now. And so I get very excited when I see things like that happening, around credentials and stuff. And honestly, a lot of the employers out there that we talk to don't even know what it is they want or need. If you try to talk to them about, well, what's a good skill set you're looking for, they don't know. I just need, I can teach you to do a few specific things when you get to the job, but I just need you to be work ready when you come. And so working sometimes with professional associations gives you a little better idea of, what's best practices, what's worth knowing in the field. But just seeing some discussion around that is, I think more and more people are feeling that.
Yeah, Spencer, you can relate. I think many of us probably can. Yeah, I mean, I'd love to hear thoughts. There's both. I guess this all comes down to value. I think in a lot of ways, value is being redefined at the moment, and it's up to. It's up to us in a lot of ways to really decide what we want to be of value, right? Moving forward, that question has not been answered. I mean, in most cases, yeah, making a ton of money, that is the highest point on the value scale. I think a lot of this work, and certainly some of the convergence with sort of the blockchain and Web3 world, which is where a lot of my interest is, man, there is a completely different thought around what ultimately should be valuable, and more of it centered around public goods. We get into tragedy of the commons conversations very quickly. But yeah, any thoughts on that? We've got about 5 minutes left, but would love others to jump in. Yeah, Lisa
So
mentioned.
I have,
Sorry, who was it that just did some blockchain voting? Sorry, I just saw that and I realized.
Utah County, I think.
Utah
Yeah.
County.
Utah County. Yeah, yeah. And Colorado has done a bit in the past as well. Sorry, go ahead, Marty.
No, I was just, it's interesting, all this work, we're still all overcoming the cold start problem. And even with these micro credentials or these alternate credentials, like until the institution side, until the receiver values that credential as a thing that matters, we've done a lot of work around teachers, and a tremendous amount of that work around teachers was just aligning the value of a certificate or a professional development path or any of that to student outcomes, for example. And so I think there's a significant map that still has to be drawn that says, now we can correlate or at least relate the accomplishment of this credential with this outcome upstream. And that's, we're all working with, just moving the credential from place to place and certifying that it was a thing. What we've seen over the years with teachers, at least, is that, okay, now does the state or does the district or does the school value that credential as a thing, and that achieving that credential. So Google Classroom is a great example from the teacher's perspective. A teacher with a Google Classroom certification will get placed in New York City schools faster than one that doesn't, because that has been shown to be a valuable credential for a teacher in that space. So I still think we have some hills to overcome, and kind of figuring out how to prove outcomes upstream. And a lot of the work's been done around students, Greg, and the work that they're doing in Broward around Algebra 1, and really proving out that these certifications of algebra education and the connectivity with tutors and how much that impacts their outcomes. All these verticals need that outcome-based architecture as well, is from what we've seen, at least in one vertical.
And I would just add, I was pleased to see that in Europe this morning as well, that they went right to the creating a machine readable version of their academic standards, and said that is the foundation for all of the exchange that they're doing. And I would just, maybe since we are, focused here someone in Colorado, just put it back to you folks in Colorado a little bit of like, if there's one thing I would recommend that you guys, attend to, is begin building some type of a case and credential engine infrastructure. It doesn't need to be expensive. It doesn't need to take a lot of technical effort. But until you do that, you're not going to be able to really participate in comprehensive learner record or any sort of a credential exchange. You already have your K-12 math and English standards in case network. You probably are participating to some degree with Credential Engine. But this next part is now to start connecting that together and say, well, what are the, begin to, I would recommend starting with some common course. If anything, I would recommend like Introduction to Computer Science, like a summative course from high school and an introductory course in college, and go through and just get everyone who has, a course at approximately that level to begin to articulate the course objectives and then crosswalk them so that you can begin to talk about exchanges for micro-credentials associated with a course like that.
So what I have been able to do, and it's more of a traditional route, but so we assign micro-credentials to students on Livex for college career readiness skills, soft skills, whatever you want to talk about it. What I've done now is I have created, to begin with, 7 courses at CU Denver, where students can stack those credentials in Livex and come to CU Denver and earn college credit for those credentials.
Yep.
And I've aligned the learning objectives, all of those things, so they all talk to each other, because what happens in Livex is great, but at the end of the day, people recognize what a college credit looks like. So I've had to argue for how much work needs to go in for a student in Livex for them to be eligible for a college credit. And that's what the school districts are telling me they're most excited about.
Yep.
Because not only they need something for students to have college and career readiness credentials, but for them to have college credit that can go into electives as they go into, college, that would be very helpful. And I'm in conversation with a university in India, and they're very excited about giving credentials to their students from a university in the US about this, soft skills, which employers are needing, but they don't have data point. It's not data driven, any of those things. So that's one way I have kind of moved in that direction, particularly because we don't have at the institutions, at the higher ed institutions, we are beginning to have these conversations about soft skills or college career readiness. We haven't figured it out. So that's one way I'm moving it forward.
You and I met before, and we're right on the same page on that, right? So absolutely, and just doing it really now across the ecosystem, is really, I would suggest that that's the next step for Colorado C-Lab, is to begin that type of work.
Sure.
Yeah, the nice alignment, the entire sort of, ETPL, the eligible training provider list, which is sort of the master, and Spencer could probably speak to this better. But that entire list is, I think now we're nearly mapped to CTDL. So we, I guess the last thing I'll say is wrapping this is our thought with this broader framework is now we've got digital identity at a state level. We've got data collaboratives, like actually, and this doesn't just stay within education. I mean, we're looking at, how does data move from education into health and human services or other agencies, and obviously the credentials and pathways work, of which, Gita's work, Livex, there's a ton of projects that are in those. Now we're thinking, there is finally, I think, collective alignment in what's possible. But yeah, Greg, you're exactly right. Next step is really starting to understand, and I don't think it's just a, something like CASE makes a ton of sense, but we're moving a big ship, and I'm excited by it. But it's, that's sort of the next step, and we're hoping that the innovation challenge here is at least the next sort of catalyst to take that next step. So we're right up at the top of the hour. Any final things folks want to share? Other events coming up, whatever it might be, in the last minute or two here. Always want to give that option for folks if there's anything pressing coming that's related here.
I'm just super excited about the work being done around identity credentialing. I was a passport acceptance agent for a while and saw too many people get caught in a Jew loop of, if they lost their paperwork for whatever reason, that you couldn't get another certified copy of your birth certificate without a photo ID, but then you couldn't get a photo ID without a certified copy of your birth certificate, and would literally have to get the congressional offices involved to help people break out of that catch-22. So seeing some stuff that's going to start fixing stupid crap like that.
We're on the edge of literally a laminated QR code being provided to anyone homeless, anyone that doesn't, as being a valid form of an ID. I mean, this is the sort of vision with a lot of this sort of work. And so it's pretty exciting to think about that sort of, yeah, you're right. To me, identity is at the root of a lot of this. So it's awesome. Cool. Well, thanks everybody. I know we're a little over time. We'll always hang and chat if folks want to, but if not, we'll do it again. These are again monthly, third Wednesday at noon Mountain. So feel free to hop back in, and we'll probably take maybe an international lens next month. I think that's the plan. So thanks all, and good luck on the innovation challenge.
Thank